Something magical will come out of it.
So if you've been online at all this week, you might have noticed the buzz surrounding WWE's latest documentary special, WrestleMania 40 Behind the Curtain. And it's not just because it's tied to one of WWE's biggest events in recent history, though that definitely helps. See, the special was supposed to be released days after the show and offer a behind-the-scenes look at the two main events involving Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. But the release was quietly delayed over what was later claimed to be a need for more editing. The more cynical portion of the online wrestling fan base has created its own theory in the meantime. Johnson demanded the special be edited to put himself in the best possible light, as his recent WWE return has been seen as something of an image rehabilitation. Whatever the reason, the special finally dropped on Wednesday, so let's talk about it. For the uninitiated, here's a summary of what happened. Riding off the success of Rhodes becoming a fan favorite and Reigns' years-long run as an unstoppable, tyrannical champion, WWE decided to book the pair in back-to-back WrestleMania main events. The rematch at WrestleMania 40 was good to go months in advance, only for a few roadblocks to pop up. The biggest was the return of The Rock, who not only continued his years-long campaign of teasing a dream match with Reigns, but was also brought on as a board member for WWE's parent company, TKO. This happened mere days before Vince McMahon's latest legal scandal came to light, and he subsequently left the company. Yet despite Johnson openly teasing the match on WWE programming and in pretty big interviews, the company went forward with having Rhodes win his second Royal Rumble and indicate he'd be the one challenging Reigns. But days later, he appeared on Friday Night SmackDown and announced he'd be stepping aside in favor of letting Rock challenge Reigns instead. Fans hated this segment, so much so that the rallying cry of #WeWantCody was still trending on social media days later. The backlash was so loud, WWE chose to pivot away from what would have been a major blockbuster match in favor of Rhodes vs. Reigns 2 with a few more wrinkles added in. Johnson adopted a new villain persona as the final boss, Rollins was looped in because his original Mania opponent suffered an injury, and a tag team match between the four was booked for WrestleMania's opening night. Both matches were incredibly well received. Rhodes got his triumphant moment by finally becoming WWE champion, and Johnson teased a one-on-one match with Rhodes at a later date. So how's the documentary? Well, it's just okay. It's an hour long, and the back half is mostly alternate takes of the actual show, with quick backstage moments sprinkled in. So you don't miss much if you either watched the show as it happened or attended the pay-per-view live. Reigns' interview clips are kept to a minimum, we're never really presented with his perspective on the situation, and Rollins is fairly nonchalant about the whole thing. And yes, Johnson does take credit for the decision to pivot the story in its new direction, though that really shouldn't come as a surprise, as he and people in his camp have been pushing that narrative in interviews over the past few months. Is it actually the truth? I don't know, and probably won't until someone like Cody or Roman are willing to go on record about it years from now. But regardless of how much Johnson did or didn't interfere with the narrative, the special runs into some of the problems most WWE documentaries have. They can never quite find the balance of wanting to show what goes on behind the scenes while not giving away too much of how the sausage is made. I still had questions once it was over that likely wouldn't have been affected by editorial interference. Who came up with the idea to have people like John Cena and Undertaker get involved in the main event? How long had they been sitting on ideas like having Rollins appear in his old Shield gear and call back to his decade-old storyline with Reigns? Was Rhodes always set to win when the pivot happened, or did that come later? And what would that original match have looked like if Rock had never gotten involved? I know there's always a tendency to want to protect the business and keep kayfabe somewhat alive. But this is the latest in a long line of behind-the-scenes documentaries made by the company itself. It feels like that battle has already been lost. The special does have one big bright spot in that it shows Rhodes' perspective throughout all of the chaos. Here you have someone doing everything right in order to be the next face of the company, only to have his crowning moment nearly snatched away by forces well beyond his control. Rhodes is informed that he's not going to Main Event Mania mere hours before winning the Rumble, and has to keep a straight face despite unimaginable frustration behind closed doors. Fans were allowed to see the slightest glimpse of that on TV, and seeing more of it here makes what actually happened that much better. I don't hate Behind the Curtain by any means, and sure, it was fun to revisit one of the best WWE shows in recent memory, and based on YouTube numbers, plenty of you already have too. But if you were waiting for the unadulterated real story on what happened leading up to the show, you might have to keep waiting. Thanks for watching.